Alright, hello everyone, I'm back. I have moved in. I don't have my new recording setup put together yet. I am going to be using this camera soon, hopefully. But it's just a matter of I need to mess with it and set it up in this apartment, which, as you can probably tell behind me, is still kind of in stages of being put together. It's been about 2 weeks, and I saw a couple movies over those 2 weeks, so I'm gonna talk about them now. And the first one we have here is the latest live-action remake of an animated classic from Disney. You're probably getting sick of hearing this description so many times. This time of the 1994 film The Lion King, which to this day actually is, in terms of pure theater attendance numbers, is still the most successful animated movie of all time. So this iteration is directed by Jon Favreau and sports a impressive ensemble voice cast, including Donald Glover, Beyonce, Seth Rogen, Billy Eichner, Chiwetel Ejiofor, and many others, and is a remake of the 1994 original traditionally animated movie, except made with photorealistic computer-generated animals and environments, which is what we are calling live action. The process of making the movie has been described by Favreau and others as being a mixture of animation and normal photography. The filmmakers have been bristling a lot at any descriptions of the film as an animated film, being that it includes no live actors. But for all intents and purposes, everything in this film is created in a computer. And when I say this is a remake of the original film, I mean that this is an almost verbatim retelling of the film, with many of the scenes and entire strings of dialogue being entirely unchanged from the original film, which, down to their shot composition, length, and order. The Circle of Life sequence in particular is almost entirely just a photorealistic CGI version of every single shot from the traditionally animated original. There aren't really any new scenes added, at least not any that meaningfully change the course or the meaning of the plot, although some scenes are elongated just to allow the audience to either revel in the computer rendering technology or just to allow the animal characters to move around the environments more naturally. Other scenes of dialogue are mostly unchanged, except for the exact delivery and content of the jokes of some of the side characters like Zazu and Timon and Pumbaa. But the ultimate nature and rhythm of every scene is pretty much the exact same. I've called these live-action Disney remakes shot-for-shot remakes before, but this is the first one that actually fits that description without any hyperbole whatsoever. The runtime is padded out from around 90 minutes to just under 2 hours so that it can justify itself as a proper blockbuster event film. But there is no real new story ground being broken here at all. One minor change, I guess, is the precise nature of the hyenas' relationship with the lions, where in the animated film they're cast out for being low-class subjects, while in this one they're meant to be some sort of ethnic group, which doesn't really change anything, and it's potence is completely gutted by their shortening of the Be Prepared song that not only was originally very good in the original movie, but it explicitly spells out the sort of fascistic leanings of Scar's motives and goals, and that's all just completely lost. They also do this dumb, Disney corporate diversity thing where they pit Shenzi the hyena and Nala the lion against each other as if they're lifelong personal rivals, despite the fact that Shenzi has precisely 4 lines in the whole movie. So at the end, when the lions and the hyenas are fighting, we can have a scene of them personally fighting, and it's epic because they're girls. They did the same thing in one of the Avengers movies, where both of the new ones. I think there's a TV tropes page about it. And yeah, I couldn't really believe that they were trying to do a girl power moment with Shenzi the hyena. And then, like I said, Zazu makes John Oliver jokes. Billy Eichner yells as Timon. Those are the only other real changes. Otherwise, the text of the film is pretty much entirely unchanged from the original, and on that front, I suppose this is still a coherent story, and probably one that will still manage to be emotionally involving for some people just by virtue of its familiarity and the formulaic but effective emotional beats of this particular story. But make no mistake, this is a virtue that belongs entirely to the original film from 1994, which this movie is very proudly aping off of and not changing in any meaningful way as far as its text goes. So I can hardly count any narrative sense as, a success on this film's part. And then there is the CGI, which is obviously the focal point of much of the discussion and marketing of this film outside of the voice cast. And I don't think my take on the CGI in this film is going to surprise anybody. It's not a new or particularly unique take, and I have spoken at length before about my problems with the various formal aspects of these adaptations of traditionally animated movies to live action by Disney. The computer animation in this movie is, at least in terms of the quality of texturing, lighting, and fluidity and realism of the movement, is phenomenal, and I feel like that's not surprising. If the original 1994 Lion King never existed, and this was the first iteration of this story that was ever made, with this level of quality computer animation, it would probably be like a Best Picture nominee just by virtue of its technical brilliance, in the same kind of vein as something like Avatar. Some scenes do in fact look like a Disney nature documentary, and especially in depicting landscapes and when the animal characters are moving naturalistically. Thanks to having a talented cinematographer in Caleb Deschanel, the movie does at times produce some technically very beautiful and brilliant images and shows off the mind-boggling abilities of computer rendering nowadays, but we do not live in a reality with the original movie having never been released, and where this is not a photorealistic carbon copy of it. So the technical brilliance only runs skin deep. The aesthetic change offers nothing to the meaning of the story, and more importantly, this aesthetic is woefully wrong for this particular story, even more so than other live-action Disney remakes prior to this one. And I feel like this point doesn't really need to be very complicated. Photorealistic animals speaking and singing in perfect English looks really stupid. Convincing me that a special effect is actually a real, natural animal, and also convincing me that that animal is believably talking and singing my favorite Elton John hits, makes for a ton of uncanny valley moments. And when you're working specifically with photorealistic animals, and I am not at all the first to point this thing out, they just aren't capable of emoting in any sort of involving or clear way. Not only could I not usually tell which lions were which unless they were explicitly saying so, but every scene just feels awkward. Some of the vocal performances in this are already stilted and less energetic compared to the animated film, like Timon and Pumbaa, and most notably Scar, who is far less gay and prissy and threatening than in the original movie. But some of the speaking and singing performances in this sound pretty soulful and emotive, especially from, like, Childish Gambino. And the characters, as they're animated, just cannot convey it. Photorealistic environments, too, are less effective at clearly communicating the emotions of this story than the bright colors and expressive lines and movement of traditional animation. And the filmmakers themselves seem to be aware of this problem, because much of the additional dialogue in this movie is characters just explaining their feelings and motivations because they're unclear visually, which results in a movie that cuts scenes from the 90-minute original in order to elongate it to 2 hours. And all of this makes watching the movie a very strange and kind of unnerving experience where I'm not only bored because everything I'm seeing I've already seen before hundreds of times, but there's also a disconnect between what I'm supposed to be feeling and what I'm seeing on the screen. All the same emotional beats and cues are there, but they aren't borne out in anything in the actual design or filmmaking. Every effect and character in this movie is just a lifeless, uncanny husk that is evoking the memory of the emotions of the original film, but not actually producing those emotions themselves. It's why I've been describing this movie as like watching the ghost of another movie. The musical numbers are particularly ill-suited for this medium change, and it got to the point that I was actively annoyed when it was getting to the musical numbers, and I like most of the songs in The Lion King. There's just not much for these animals to do that's expressive or entertaining in a fast-paced musical number that also looks like a real animal being an animal. And so most of the musical numbers are just the characters walking around in an environment and singing, and sometimes one of them will fall over or fart or whatever. And again, the soulful singing of Beyonce and Childish Gambino just sounds so awkward and out of place coming out of these normal-looking lions. The story of The Lion King is also one with a pretty internalized main character struggle about lifestyle and responsibility, and with the action mainly taking place at the very beginning and very end, with not much in the way of dramatic scenery or action in the sizable middle chunk. But that chunk is driven by the emotional arc of the main character as expressed in the animation. Here, that arc is just not at all as effective because whenever there are scenes heavily dependent on the emotions of a main character, we can't really show them convincingly because they just need to look and act like regular animals. Simba can't cry when his dad dies, so we just hear him say "get up" a lot while sounding sad, but just coming out of a normal, neutral-looking lion cub. When he screams no when Mufasa falls into the gorge, they even do the zoom out from the original, and it looks even stupider than the Seinfeld's pit stain version. And they show it twice, and it looks so bad. Simba and Nala can't make sex face at each other during Can You Feel the Love Tonight because they don't have eyebrows, and so all they can do is just walk around and lay down and sing in broad daylight. Simba doesn't even spell out the word sex in the dust when he lays down, because I guess the animation team on this one didn't care about their sound effects department. I could go on and on, but the point is, this might have been the most pointless movie I've ever seen. It is, in no exaggeration, a nearly shot-for-shot photorealistic remake of the perfectly fine original film, where the photorealism, the only thing setting it apart from the original film in any meaningful way, works in active detriment to the story's emotional resonance and just sucks the creative life and energy out of the original product that it's trying to mirror. It was sort of a depressing thing to watch because this is one of the biggest and most successful and most expensive feats of just corporate mediocrity in film that I've ever witnessed. Literally just repackaging one of your biggest box office hits, which by the way, they still do like Lion King Broadway and make bank off of that as well, even though the show's good. Just repackaging it as this tech demo that resells the same product to the public in a glossier, but more soulless and less aesthetically motivated and more aesthetically misguided presentation. And they are absolutely taking it to the bank. Like, this movie is definitely going to break $1 billion. I think it may already have done that by the time I'm recording this. Rather than create new stories, they can just kind of resell the same story and characters in each successive generation, and their simultaneous acquisition of the entire media landscape will ensure that there will be little else to choose from other than Thing from 20 years ago again, the movie. It just bored and depressed the fuck out of me to watch this movie. It was a perfect encapsulation of how a lot of this corporate nostalgic bullshit that's getting put out lately just manufactures the suggestion of a feeling and an appeal to a former happiness rather than using its massive wealth and impressive technology to create new happiness and new experiences, or to break new aesthetic ground, or to do literally anything other than just the same thing as before, but bigger, or more real, or darker, or more epic, more expensive, filled with more of your favorite people. It's just a cynical approach to media and to movies, and I think it has made people into more cynical viewers, content in an era of high ticket prices and streaming services to only really go to the theater to see stuff they already know and like, but, with voice actors they recognize, and with animation that looks more real, which, by the way, I don't understand the appeal of at all. I don't really care about looking real. I don't think that's the business of animation or film in general. I'm more about emotional believability and aesthetic purpose and function. Nothing about these characters looking like real lions makes me empathize with them anymore. In fact, it does almost the precise opposite. So I think I've made my point. I really did not like this movie. Its only positives are virtues of the original film. Everything is pretty much the same, and everything in it just feels and looks bland and joyless. And knowing that $260 million was spent on making something whose entire purpose is just reminding you of something better that they made for a fraction of the cost makes me sad. It's also incredibly ironic that, in a way, the original Lion King, the crown jewel of the hand-drawn Disney Renaissance era, really set the stage for the demise of theatrical, traditional hand-drawn animation with its tremendous success. Because after Lion King's impressive box office run and explosion of revenue for Disney's consumer products division, the studio split its animation unit into two and pushed for faster turnover of projects, which ended in this slew of mostly very mediocre and cheap-looking direct-to-video sequels and annual theatrical features that I think, even if you're a fan of them, or if Lion King isn't, your favorite, you can very much, agree they did not sort of capture any cultural moment on the same level as Lion King. And so when those features failed to match the performance of Lion King, Disney took notice of Pixar's financial success since Toy Story, with computer animated films whose novelty as an emerging technology were very much contributing to their success. And so they acquired that company and proceeded to spend the last decade mostly just making sequels to older pre-purchasing Pixar movies, and slowly phased traditional animation out at Disney Animation Studios entirely in favor of computer animation, which in turn resulted in CG just being the dominant medium for theatrical animation writ large. And as rendering power has increased, Disney, with all of these resources, is able to maintain its box office success by positioning themselves all the time at the brink of the latest filmmaking technology, and just regurgitating the same exact stories as 20 years ago in the process. I'm excited that Mulan seems to be interested in adapting the actual myth rather than just the animated film, and I am cautiously optimistic for that one. But other than that, this Disney live-action remake trend has fully run its course with me, and I can't say I'm super hopeful for the quality of the surely many that will be following this one. So I am gonna go ahead and give The Lion King a 3 out of 10. I honestly could go lower. I hate this movie the more that I think about it. It's just an incredibly cynical and misguided movie, and it's just utterly pointless and boring. Just a big fucking waste of time. So let me know what you thought of it. Let me know what you thought of this waste of time. And yeah, I have one more review sort of on the back burner to do, and then hopefully between then and a little bit later we can figure out the camera situation and get that going, and everything will be lovely and you won't have to deal with this weird lighting anymore. But that's all for me on Lion King. I'll see you for the next movie review, which will be coming out shortly after this one. Sorry for the hiatus, as always. I feel like the people who watch my videos are pretty used to them by now. But yeah, see you next time.